All right. So thank you for stopping by. This is a bit of an extra pitch that we organized internally with the people that might be interested and that potentially missed the session yesterday. So I will be presenting what is GetFocus and what we do. But the long story short is that the technological future is actually more predictable than what we can imagine. And this is because all the winning technologies tend to leave behind some clues. And it turns out that these clues are hidden in the citation networks that underlie global patent data. And we can actually measure how fast technologies are improving in the real world before it actually happens, which means that we can make better decisions when it comes to these emerging technologies, but not just better decisions, but finally there's a way to make objective decisions rather than only relying on opinions, hype, and trends. So that's what we built. We built agents that can get you to this type of decision-grade technology intelligence, and in a way that you can actually make better technology bets when it comes to assessing all the innovation that happens all the time. And the problem that we are trying to solve is exactly this, that there's continuously more and more innovation across time emerging all the time. And this is also empirically true, because if you look at the numbers of all the emerging innovations, you're going to see that it's increasing exponentially, which means that since time sadly hasn't expanded, you don't have enough time to actually deal with all this innovation and deciding what to do about it. So this leads to a situation where you have a puzzle that keeps growing faster than your ability to actually solve it. And these are the type of organization that we tend to collaborate with. And since our forecasting is based on patent data, we are lucky enough that almost everything is patented. So we can work in any kind of industry. And technically, we work with the innovation department, foresight department, whoever needs to make the ultimate decision when it comes to a technology bet. And as I was explaining, this is the problem that everybody recognized to have, exponentially more and more technology emerging all the time, not enough time to learn about it, and therefore you have the risk of having blind spots or ultimately not knowing what to do with all the noise when it comes to these new technologies. And since this problem is very well recognized, every organization tries to tackle it in a different way, but the solution that we currently have available are typically these two flavors. The first one is relying on experts, which to be honest, it's great. You should most definitely continue to rely on your experts. But the problem with the expert is that even if you have a small army of them, there's still entirely too much data to process. And also, it's very rare that you are able to have an expert in every single domain. So you're still going to have some pieces of information that are missing. And the other type of solution are trend monitoring tools. And to be honest, you're going to be able to find probably thousands, if not more of them. But the problem with trends is that they look at numbers. So they look at the number of investment, the number of research paper, the number of patents even. But numbers are only a measure of popularity. They tell you where everybody else is looking. But just because everyone is going in a certain direction doesn't mean that that's the right direction. So this is the problem that we are trying to address. And the way we solve it is in a process that we have developed with the MIT, and it roughly looks like this. The first thing that we do is that we use AI to scout every possible technology that can solve your technological challenge. And we make sure to include everything that goes from industry standards to very emerging, even still lab stage, research stage technology. So we are sure that we look at everything. Then what we do is that we evaluate this original list of technologies based on your criteria. So you might have constraints, you might have some performance threshold, you might have some requirements. We take all of that into account to narrow it down to something that actually matters to you. And then arguably the most important stage is the forecasting, which is the part that we co-developed with the MIT. I will show you how that works roughly, but basically what we can do is measure how fast any technology is improving. And based on all the historical cases, the fastest improving technology is always the one that ends up dominating in its industry. And this is especially important if we think, for example, of R&D, where you have to make a bet today and see the results in 10, 15, or 20 years. So you need to make sure to bet on something that makes, not only because it makes sense today, but because it's actually going to make sense in the future. And once we have selected these high improving technologies, then what we can do is transition into the last stage, which is the deep dives, which is where you want to start asking the big question, like what are my competitors doing, what they're doing that I'm not doing, how exactly works from a technical standpoint, and what are the white spaces where I can enter this market. So all the questions that might be strategic, competitive, or technical questions. And so far, on our journey, as I mentioned, we have developed this with the MIT. And our launching customer in 2021 was the US Department of Defense, which is still by far our largest customer. And we won the Innovation Award the very first year that at the Consumer Electronics Show there was an AI category. And so far our insights are also used by governments to partially determine the technology strategy of their country. But a process only matters if it actually works, right? So now the big question is how exactly can we predict which technology are going to win in the future? And the answer lies in our research with the MIT. So we started to collaborate with them in 2018 because they have been researching this topic for the past 40 years. And they asked all the questions about why one technology wins, why another one loses, what is more slow, and all these questions. And they realized that they had so many theories, but they had no data. So what they had to do was this massive effort of actually empirically measure technology progress in 28 domains that they selected. So they would set KPIs for performance and cost, and they would measure year by year how fast all this technology were improving. And what they found was quite remarkable because every single technology in every single domain that they looked to improve exponentially and at a consistent rate. The only difference is that different technologies in different industry improve at different rates. There are technologies that improve very fast and technology that take a very long time. So if we look at this example, we have optical telecommunication on top, which is improving at roughly 62% per year. And at the bottom, we have milling machines that are improving at roughly 3% per year. Now, they are both improving exponentially, but there's a very wide difference if something improves at 3% plus 3%, like interest on a bank account, versus something improving at 62% per year, because it's a much more aggressive exponential curve. Now, all of this was very interesting, all improve exponentially, all at a consistent rate, but what can we do with this information? And there are two problems with their research. The first one is that it took them 6 years only to collect all the data about these improvements. And the second problem is that if you have to wait for something to arrive on the market to measure it, then you're late because everybody will be already aware of it and you cannot use it in a strategic way. So that's when we jumped in and we started to work with them to see if perhaps it's possible to predict the improvement rate instead of having to measure it empirically after it already happened. And turns out that the answer is yes, it is possible to predict these rates. And the way we can predict it out of all the metrics that we looked at are two key metrics in the citation networks of patent data that accurately correlate with this improvement rate that the MIT had to measure. And the thing specifically that we look at are two metrics that are called cycle time and knowledge flow. So if we invent something, for example, in 2022, in our invention, we are going to cite back to prior arts that we are improving over. And we can measure how long it took from a generation of a technology to produce a new generation of itself and therefore to progress. In this example, if we cite back to something from 2019, then it looks like it took 3 years, if we are inventing in 2022, to come up with a new generation which was worth patenting. And the second thing that we measure is how big this improvement was. And the way that we do it is that we look at how much our invention gets cited within the first 3 years of publication and how fast it gets cited, because this gives us a measure of how big the improvement was. So combining them together, we look at how fast the technology takes a step forward and how meaningful each of these steps forward are. So the rough process of the forecasting works like this. We use AI to ingest global patent data and retrieve every single patent that relates to a given technology. We make a patent data sets for each competing technology. We calculate cycle time and knowledge flow in the citations. And then when we plot together different competing technologies, it's very easy to spot which one is improving faster and therefore the one that has the highest potential of actually dominating its space. To make it a little bit more tangible, I will give you one example of a past disruption that we were able to pick up early signals of before it actually happened. This example is in the automotive space. So what you're looking at is what we call an improvement rates. Every dot on this line is how much the technology has improved from a performance and reduced its cost year by year. So at the top, you're going to see the improvement rate of lithium-ion batteries, and at the bottom, the improvement rate of hydrogen fuel cells. Now, it was clear from our metric already in the beginning of the 2000s that lithium-ion batteries were improving much, much faster than hydrogen fuel cells. But yet, what did we see in reality? That all the major automakers in the beginning of the 2000s started to invest very heavily in hydrogen fuel cells. And even when the market started to give the first signs that something was shifting towards electric, for example, when Tesla introduced his Roadster in 2009, they still continue to improve, to invest and pouring billion into hydrogen fuel cells, and in many cases it took until roughly 2020 for them to publicly admit that they basically made the wrong technology choice, and now they had to pivot towards electric, because at that point it was clear to everyone that the future was going to be EVs and battery-driven vehicles. So basically the improvement rates serve as our early warning signals that something is shifting when it comes to emerging technology, because they're improving faster than all the competing options, which means that sooner or later they will match the performance and cost standard that will allow them to compete with what today consider as the industry standards. And I'm happy to share one example with you of all the example that we looked at, also with the MIT. But basically, this holds true in every single industry that we looked at and for every single technologies that we examined so far. So basically, to sum it up, what we are able to do is objectively measure technological progress for the first time. So you can actually assess technology objectively and in a quantitative way, rather than relying on opinion and trends, which means that we can spot the fastest improving technology, which is where you should focus your attention when it comes to evaluating these new technologies. And basically this translates in being able to see the technological future before it actually happens. And we know that it sounds a little bit like magic, especially because forecasting is typically associated with a bit of speculation. But we have actually made it a science, and we can actually give you an objective competitive advantage when it comes to making the right choice for new technologies. Thank you for stopping by. And if you're interested in getting a customized piece of insights in your domain on something that might be more relevant and tangible for you, you can scan the QR code. Just contact me, give me a challenge, and we will make something for you. Worst case scenario, you have some free insights. Thank you.